Have you ever wondered why some people struggle no matter what they do, while others continue to thrive in everything they do? Hi, I'm Violet Rainwater, and I'm the host of The Awakening Show. This is our first show, so welcome. I'm so excited that you're here. As this is the first show, I did want to share on this episode. It's going to be a lot about my story and where the desire to create this show came from and what exactly we'll be covering in here, my mission, my vision, and what you can expect to get as well. So, a lot of what we're going to be going into in the Awakening Show is taking a look at the science of struggle, as well as the art of ease and success, because it is very much an art, but struggle also is very much a science. And the purpose of this is to help you. So, no matter where you're at right now, whatever struggle that you have, no matter how far behind you might think you are, my goal is to provide you a framework after a lifetime of research to help you bridge the gap between the two. So, here you are. Here's where you are destined to be. Here is the framework to help get you there. And although it's not something that happens overnight, I think sometimes when we think about the word awakening, we think of it as like in one moment. But what I have found is that awakening is a practice. Awakening is a choice that we make in every moment and every day of how we're going to be operating and moving forward. One of the best ways to explain this is by one of my favorite teachers, and that's Dr. Abraham Maslow, where he explained that in every moment we have this choice to step forward into growth or to step backward into safety. And most of us operate from the past, from that place of safety, not even realizing it. And that was me for many, many years, which I will be sharing with you guys. But in order to truly awaken and operate at our highest potential, because that's the goal, we must choose growth again and again. And Maslow even says that. He says growth must be chosen again and again and again. And so we must choose to awaken. And that is often easier said than done. But with the right tools and a framework that's so easy to follow, and I'll be sharing about that framework here today. I call it my Alive method. You are able to choose that state of awakening in every moment. So that way you can unlock your unlimited highest potential and also thrive in this new world. Because underneath it all, what I have learned after a lifetime of research is that each of us came here to thrive. We came to self actualize and experience abundance, prosperity, joy. And if we're struggling in any of those areas, it's not our fault. There, I said it. It's not your fault. What if you're right? What if it's not your fault? And in the show, we're going to explain where the cause of that really is, what the root cause of it. And it's not our fault, but it is our responsibility to change it. And if we continue to stay asleep to who we really are, the patterns that are programmed into us that we partake in on a daily basis, unless we awaken to that, we're going to continue living in struggle. And so I'm here to guide you out of struggle and into ease, because it's as simple as having a new practice in your workday, in your stay-at-home day. It's a choice that you're making to see things from a brand new vantage point. And so I wanted to share where my story begins. And as always, there's various beginnings, right? There's the beginning when I got into the workplace or when I got into college and discovered communication theories and like all the things that happen on the inside of human behavior. But my passion for human behavior really started, or understanding it rather, when I was a young girl. So my family and I immigrated to America when I was 4 years old from St. Petersburg, Russia. So I was not born Violet Rainwater, although I do agree it's one of the coolest names in the world, in the galaxy. But I was born Violeta Yurivna Igolnikova. Want to give that a try? Violeta Yurivna Igolnikova. And when we came to America, America and the USSR were right smack in the middle of a war called the Cold War. And so it really was not a popular time to be a Russian immigrant. And as excited as my family and I was to be in America and to be working towards being an American, Americans didn't return this eagerness, right? Because if you were Russian, you were automatically the enemy. You were a commie. I was called a commie long before I even knew what a commie was. You were the outsider. And so this created a lot of challenges and adversity in my early years. And then you put just the normal immigration challenges on top of it with poverty and neglect, having both parents having to work night and day. We were latchkey kids, but we were immigrant latchkey kids, which I think is even, more freedom and more situations where basic needs just couldn't be met. And that's pretty standard in the immigrant story. And so this early experience, I call it like this experience, it was so rich, even though I experienced such poverty at a young age, it was so rich because it gave me this early experience of emotions that were very deep. And in addition to that, although I lived in poverty and had neglect and abuse and a lot of these challenges, I went to school among very wealthy families. So part of the Jewish outreach program at that time was to allow immigrant kids to come for a free education. And so I really got to experience this whole other world. Like there was my world, and then there was this world of ease and success. At least that's how it looked like from my perspective, right? Like what wealth looked like, what peace looked like, what mamas who stayed home and had warm cookies and milk waiting for their kids looked like. And so both of these experiences were so different. And so on one hand, it really inspired me to understand how I too can be wealthy and successful and help my family stop struggling. And so that's where that fire in my belly was born. But what I didn't recognize for many years, and maybe this is something that will resonate with you, is those early adverse experiences were wired into me. So essentially, as I witnessed my parents struggle, as I myself endured the struggle was wired into me. And if that wasn't bad enough, what I learned many years later is that I am a second generation survivor. And if you're new to that concept, essentially what that means is my father, in this case, is a Holocaust survivor. And so I'm a second generation survivor from my father, but I'm also a third generation survivor from both of my grandparents. And I share this with you because what I've learned through my research, there is a science called epigenetics, which has actually proven that children of Holocaust survivors, so even though I physically did not experience the Holocaust, on a molecular level, I did. And it altered my stress response, which means that it's much easier for me before I even took a breath of air to operate from fight, flight, freeze, or fawn. And take that and add the immigration story, the poverty, the bullying, the always an outsider, never belonging, never that sense of belonging, and never feeling safe in the world. That was wired into me. And so even though I was able to fool a lot of people, myself included, I developed a lot of coping mechanisms to really run from my past. So the perfectionism, the workaholism, the constantly spending so I can keep up with the Jones. I had all these destructive coping mechanisms as an adult due to those experiences in my youth. So even though I was super successful on the outside, was making six figures pretty much my second year out of college, I continued to be wired to struggle. So regardless of what it looked like on the outside, on the inside, there was this constant inner battle going on. It was this constant struggle. And I didn't have an awareness to it even for many, many years, as much as I studied people because I was fascinated with human development and human behavior. As much as I studied people, I didn't have an awareness to the reason why I was so fascinated with it was because I was programmed to fail. And I had to see that. I had to recognize that in order to awaken to the power that I really have in every moment. And it's power that I constantly gave away, not even knowing it. And so that's really the inspiration for this is I've spent my entire life studying and researching and putting together something that I didn't even know what I was putting together. A lot of what I share, the brain map, the channels, This is not something that I created on my own. This is something that I downloaded. So I look at it as I'm co-creating it from above. And this was the message that I came to share. And it's interesting because I've been wanting to share this for so long, but I always had other projects or other things that I was working on. And I've been feeling more and more called to just start showing up and sharing this framework to whomever it might help. And what happened, what was so interesting is I usually am very on the go, and I did not respond to that calling that it's time to bring this content to the masses. And so what happened? I tore my meniscus. I'm on crutches right now. I'm confined here to my home. I have very little activities that I can partake in that I was partaking in before. Like 90% of the things I used to do, I can't do. But it caused me to bring this now here to the masses. And so my goal is just to share this framework with you all, because what I've realized is I'm not the only one that's asleep, that most of us are asleep. We're walking around in a trance-like state based on the programming that we received many, many years ago. And we're just stuck and we can't break free. And so this is about you breaking free of your past so you can unlock your highest, greatest potential today. And all these years of research, it has come to become a 5-step framework that I'm going to share with you guys here briefly, because each of these pillars, you can use them on your own, or when you put them together in that order, that's when you're really able to make great shifts in your life. Why? Because when we change how we operate on the inside, we change what shows up on the outside. As below, so above. It is a universal principle. It's not that I'm telling you, it's not mine. This is a universal principle. The framework just simply gives you a way to change how you be from moment to moment and in certain moments in itself, right? And there a lot of the tools that I'm offering you, or I will offer you, is all to help you with that transformation. So the ALIVE method is what I've come up with, and it's an acronym for awareness, letting go, imagination, vibration, and engagement. And I use all 5 of them on their own. Sometimes I use a few together, but when you put all 5 of them together, so if I want you to think about an area in your life where you're struggling right now, or maybe that you struggled in the past, or you have a tendency to struggle, or think about maybe a friend or a coworker that struggles in the same area in their life. The first acronym, A, for awareness, this is where all change begins. One of the books that I read early on in my search for answers is Dr. Robert Anthony, not Tony Robbins, Dr. Robert Anthony. Can't believe it left my mind. The ultimate secrets of total self-confidence. It's a tongue twister. The ultimate secrets of total self-confidence. And it even said on the cover, it said, do not read this book unless you want to change your life. And it did change my life because I took away one key component. There was a lot of gold nuggets, but this was like the biggest In there, Dr. Robert Anthony explains that we can never outperform our current level of awareness. So if you want to change something, if you want to change the trajectory of your life, of your business, it has to begin with deepening our awareness. And this is where all change begins. And so when it comes to us human beings, we must have a greater awareness to why we do what we do. Because once we understand why we do what we do, that's when we're able to step back and see it for what it is. See, if you think about all the things that stress you out. So when I ask people, like, what's not working in your life? I might hear things like my bank account, my spouse, my kids, my boss, my territory. And I used to think all those things too. Like, I'm not above this, right? Like sometimes I have those thoughts, but what I've learned is that it's not those things that are causing that stress. It's our perception of those things. It's what we say to ourselves about those things. It's what I say to myself about the money or lack of in the bank that causes me anxiety, not the lack of money in itself, because that's just what it is. It's my perception of it and the meaning that I put on it. And so we have to be able to take a step back and understand that all those things, those meanings, those stories, those come from our programming from our childhood, super early on. And so when we can take a step back when that programming is like in action, so like let's say you get really triggered by shitty people, I don't know, you get triggered by bossy people. You'll notice when somebody's being bossy next time, instead of having your normal reaction where you want to lash out, right? Fight, flight, flee, or fawn, you're going to be able to step back and be like, oh, here it is. Here's the programming. It's happening. And when you're able to do that, that's money. In fact, Viktor Frankl talks about this. Viktor Frankl wrote a book called Man's Search for Meaning. And in that book, he talked about what he coined as the last of the human freedoms. So the freedom to choose, he says that between stimuli, and you have to know his story, I'm going to share it a little bit here, but between stimuli, something happening, and response is a moment of opportunity, right? So usually something happens and we respond like, ah, you suck, or, say something nasty, or complete, like, have the drink, smoke the bong, whatever it is, whatever our thing is that we react quickly when we have something that triggers us. So what he says is in that moment, there is a moment where we can choose differently. We decide how we respond to something. And the way that he figured this out is just so inspiring. It really goes to show no matter what situation you might find yourself in, there's always tomorrow, and there's always hope, and there's always a way around it eventually, right? So he was a psychologist, and he was a young Jewish psychologist during the World War II, living in Europe. And shortly after he was married, he was picked up by the Nazis, and he spent years at various concentration camps. And I want to really paint the picture for you. So he's a newlywed. He's so in love with his wife. Like they're just newly married. I love their love story. He's separated from her. He's separated from his family. He has no idea if he's ever to see them again. And from what I remember, he never did see them again, but he didn't know at this point. And he's in Auschwitz, and he's witnessing just the worst of mankind, like the worst of the worst. And what he noticed is that when he was focused on what was actually happening, when he stayed present mentally, that when he would focus on the pain or the atrocity, that he would weaken. And if you were to weaken, you were to die in Auschwitz because it was a work camp. And so if they saw any weakness, they had no problem ending it right there. So if he wanted to survive, he could not go down that path. But what he noticed is if he didn't mentally participate in what was happening, that it was a lot easier for him to get through it, and he had more physical strength. So in his mind, he would go to where he's already done with this. Like he's already survived, and now he's in his kitchen with his wife, and she's making him his favorite dinner, and he could smell the food from his imagination, from using his imagination. And he could just like he could almost touch her. She was so close in his mind. And he said that the memory of her brought him more warmth than the sun on a cold winter morning. Wow. Wow. And that's what made him realize is they can take everything from you, but this is the last of the human freedoms, is how we will respond, where our mind will go, what we will and will not participate in. And so again, between stimuli and response, we have that opportunity to take a step back. So starts with awareness. Next, once you're aware, like, oh, this is the programming, it's not as simple as, okay, reprogram, because that adversity and trauma lives not just in that moment of time. It was programmed into our brains, our minds, and into our body. And so trauma lives in the body. And this is one of the reasons why I love practices of letting go. And I love yoga and I love stretching, because as we stretch and create space in the body, we create space in our minds. And that's what we need to do to create a little distance between the stimuli and how we respond to it. Right. And so letting go is really important. It's about taking a step back, releasing it. Sometimes I like to go on a walk. Sometimes I like to literally hang, forward fold. You can even do it on your chair. That's what I have to do right now because I don't have my normal range of motion. But just this focusing on letting go and feeling your body let go, it gets energy moving back in your body and it creates space in your mind. And now, whereas before you were stuck on a certain pathway, every time this happened, I felt like a victim. Now you're able to create a little distance and not connect with that victim mentality. Now you can connect to the victor mentality. Call it the victor principle for Viktor Frankl. And so that's the second acronym. And a lot of what I teach is the importance of letting go and coming back to your peace and your power, because that was never taught to me throughout my corporate career in grad school, in business school. I never learned about the importance of a peaceful state of being and being able to let go of those things that keep us up at night, like being able to shut off your brain. Yeah. The next one, so once we've let go, now it's time for your imagination. So remember how Viktor Frankl used his? Our imaginations are one of the most untapped resources that we have, the greatest untapped resource in our business, in our personal lives. And it's something just because we weren't like, do you remember taking an Imagination 101 class in grade school? You should have. We should have learned this all throughout school, but we didn't. Our imagination lies, the key to unlocking our potential. And so in our imagination, I like to use this concept of 1 year later, because we're always so stuck on what if the worst case happens? Well, we also have the ability to turn on what if the best case happens. So imagine it's 1 year later. I like to create a moment in time that's not too far, but far enough away. And now you tell me, imagine what it would look like if the best case scenario happened here, if the best thing possible turned out here. What does that look like? And because when you start using your imagination, you're tapping into your subconscious mind. You're creating a new landscape in your mind that you haven't had before. Imagine you constantly, if you have an anxiety problem like I did, where are your thoughts mostly? Think of that as a landscape, like it's raining all the time in Seattle, right? Well, now we're going to go to sunny California and we're going to have more sunshine. That's the power of using our imaginations. Like we open up the windows and create and add more light and new landscapes that are full with abundance and prosperity and joy and bliss. And when we do that, we literally are changing the physical chemistry in our body. Yes. So imagine when you're triggered and you're worried, that sends out a certain vibrational frequency into the world. Like think about when you're around a really depressed person. It's because energy cannot be stopped. It can only be transformed. Otherwise, it just keeps going on that same level and you can feel it, right? And so when we are able to use our imagination to now have a higher state of being and tap into these greater emotions that are on a higher vibration, that's what we start sending out. And we are energetic beings having a human experience. And by being energetic beings, it means we're not only just sending out energy at all time, we're also receiving that energy back. And so if you're always worried, you're going to have more things to worry about. So the work is really within us. And so an example here is you're worried all the time. You're worried all the time. Here comes a person that is on that same wavelength or a situation. That's all you're going to attract. Joy, abundance, prosperity, they're up here. You're not pointed in the right direction. You're not open to attracting those things. So when you start experiencing more joy, more passion, here comes a client that's going to bring you a lot of joy. Woo, look how that works. That's how that works. That's why our imaginations are so freaking powerful. But here's why else. Because when we use our imagination, something else happens. And that's the fourth pillar, and that is vibration. When we use our imagination, it changes our state of being and it increases our energy. And that's now the new vibration that we send out. Everything has to do with our vibrational state of being. As someone who spent a lot of years and decades struggling, that's what I sent out from a vibrational frequency. It doesn't matter what it looked like on the outside. I continue to attract, even with the success I had, clients, prospects, friends, situations, environments where I would struggle. And so by changing our energy, changing our frequency, and increasing our vibration on a daily basis, that's really the work that really allows us to create massive changes on the inside, which creates massive shifts on the outside, as beneath, so above. And so you'll hear me talk a lot about our vibration and our frequency. And you can just use this one pillar on its own. Anytime you have a situation where you're struggling, just realize your vibrational state of being is the best thing that you can start working on. What can you do to change your vibrational state of being? All right, last but certainly not least, E is for engagement. See, it's not enough to just have awareness, let it go, imagine, and increase our vibrational state of being. We then have to go out and share our gifts in the world. We, as human beings, we thrive in connection and in teaching and serving and giving. These are the things, very things we came to do. So if you're not out there acting on this new vibrational frequency that you're on, if you're not making calls from it or meeting new people, if you're not out doing the things, then you're missing one of the most important elements. Now, sometimes I see people doing the action without all this stuff, and that's why they run on burnout and eventually crash and burn, just like I did. But the whole purpose of this is to raise your vibrational state of being and go out into the world, shining your light, sharing your gifts, and doing it in a bold, inspired action kind of way. And when that happens, I mean, that's just magic is what happens once you're able to put all these things together. So that's the Alive method. And I hope this resonated with you. If it did, and it sounds like you want more of this, we have a lot of really cool tools that tap into the imagination, get your vibrational frequency up, and really give you ways that you can change the trajectory of your life and your business. And so if this is more of what you want, make sure you subscribe and hit that bell so you never miss an episode, and share it with your friends and drop me a line. Let me know what resonated with you the most and what you're most excited about. Next week, I'm going to be introducing you to a foundational tool called the Brain Map. And the Brain Map is really the golden key to unlocking your highest potential. So make sure you come back next week where I dive into that, and I'll even give you an opportunity to download the Brain Map for yourself and your team. Thank you so much, and I'll see you next week.